Hi everyone, welcome back to Healthy with Nicole. I'm Nicole Carter, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about what may be a trigger for your illness. So I think it's something that we don't really think about, but I often ask, I should say almost always ask my clients, and even one of our very first calls when I'm working with people, one of the questions that I will ask is, what happened right before your symptoms started? And it's always a very interesting question because I get answers like, I had another illness, I took a round of antibiotics, I had a death in the family, I witnessed a hate crime, I've heard that, I witnessed a traumatic experience, I had a tumultuous breakup or divorce. I am hearing all of these kind of things. And so what I want to point out is there's an underlying factor to all of these that you probably identified already, which is it's all very stressful. And I think back to my experience in 2012 when I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and I was actively bleeding every day and, having miserable symptoms. Right before that, what happened? And in my life, if you've read my book yet, you'll see all the details in my book, but I had many of those things happen. And of course, there is some kind of situation already set up, I think, for people that have ulcerative colitis. And I think that it could be the same for many other illnesses. Let's say you have a predisposition or you have an existing problem, and then you have a major stressor, like some of the things that I maybe mentioned, and then all of a sudden it blows up. And that's kind of what I experienced, and that's what a lot of people that I talk to say. I've heard some crazy things. I mean, one person was stabbed in the jugular and then developed UC. I mean, how much scarier does it get? And I think that's not anything that your doctor was probably gonna ask you or talk to you about, because what are they gonna do with it? But I do think there is something you can do with that information. And we can't necessarily go back in time and change the event or the situation, but I think we can dial back the clock a little bit and look at that situation and what happened and how we felt and kind of work it out from there. It's not always going to fix the situation. In fact, that's not how we fix it, but it does tell me that this was a stress-induced problem. I had a lady I talked to, I don't know, I think Egypt or something yesterday, and she made me think of this, and this is why I'm making this video, is that her son had a surgery and had stitches from this surgery, and all of a sudden started having diarrhea and had it for years. So again, I go back to, well, what happened right before this all started? And it definitely makes me wonder, what got included? Was there some bacteria that got into the body or something happened there? And so it just gives a little bit of insight as to where are we going to go with this? What is going to be our course of action? And always we're going to talk about diet because that does have a huge factor, but we have to talk about the stress on the body and what all of these things are major stressors on the body. I talk a lot more about this in my newer book that is releasing January 14th. And I feel like a lot of people just don't feel like there's anything they can do and that they're powerless in the face of these kind of stressors. And although life happens, we are not going to stop encountering stress anytime soon, and probably never. So what do we do? What do we do with this? And I do think that there are some answers here. First of all, if you have experienced a traumatic event or witnessed a traumatic event, if you can identify something that happened and you can go back to that and say, does this still affect me? Did I work this out? And maybe you might need to work on some counseling or, something along those lines that may do that. But one thing that I often recommend to people is to go back and work on the vagus nerve. And I've talked about this in other videos, where the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve that runs from your head all the way through your body, and it innervates or passes through all the organs in your body. And it does affect your digestion, and it does affect people with colitis. In fact, there are devices that you can get, and I've talked to people that have used them, and they get good results that stimulate the vagus nerve. You can also do these on your own. You can do exercises to stimulate the vagus nerve, which help with damage to the nerve due to excessive stress. And it could be chronic stress or it could be stressful event. But I do think that it hugely affects your vagus nerve. And again, I talk about this a little bit more in my book, and I'll put a link to that below. But I think it's important to know that you are not helpless, and to think that you are is making your situation worse. It's called learned helplessness. And it's a way of thinking that I can't do anything about what's going on here. I'm just gonna, curl up and die and live with it. And people do think that way. Unfortunately, this is really detrimental. And I think it's the message that people are getting. There's nothing you can do. Doesn't matter what you eat. These are all false statements, because it does matter. And I have seen people change their diet and heal from colitis. I have seen people work on their vagus nerve and heal from colitis. I have done these things and have healed from colitis, have been colitis free for 7 years. And I feel like it's an area that we need to look at. And so I would suggest, even if it's not ulcerative colitis, when you have whatever it is that you're dealing with, what happened just before the onset of your symptoms? Can you identify something that occurred, whether it's taking a medication, being forced into a medication, something happening at work, something in your relationship with your kids, your partner, or something that you just saw that really triggered you? I feel like that's actually real stuff. And go back to that and work on that as a resolution. So this is aside from all the other things that we do regarding diet and sleep and lifestyle. Think of it as a toxin. And these emotions that are tied to that are like a toxin that your body has not been able to get rid of, and it has damaged your body, your vagus nerve. And so I highly recommend kind of going through these exercises of dialing back the clock, going back to that experience that you can think of right before all this started, and start to jot down some ideas around that. What happened? What was the situation? How did you feel about that? Maybe it'll give you some clarity that you go back to working on these things. And maybe it's not a stressor. Maybe it is. You encountered a bacteria. I have worked with people that they were fine, and then all of a sudden they took a round of antibiotics, a long-term antibiotic, and got ulcerative colitis from it. And so that tells me, okay, that's probably going to take some serious work in healing the gut. But we all have this. So I think it's helpful just to look at where you started, what happened, where are you now, and start to put those thoughts into your equation of how you're going to get yourself out of this, because you will, and you can, and I see it all the time. All right, comment below. I really want to hear your thoughts on this. And if you want to talk and you want to say something about your experience, feel free. Otherwise, think of it to yourself. Do you need to go back and work on some of these things? I hope this video is helpful for you, stimulate your thinking and maybe some new ideas. But give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next video.